My name is Barbara Meynert. I'm one of the original founders of the Fung Global Institute, the predecessor of the Asia Global Institute, and I'm senior advisor to the Fung Group. The AI has been an interest of mine for some years, and so I'm really glad to be here to share some of, to be in this discussion, in this dialogue, and to have sort of very distinguished colleagues on this panel. You know, just to give you a few words of introduction, you know, our experience with AI is what we have read and what we have seen in movies. But AI is so much now part of our lives that we don't even notice it. Some of us don't know that, you know, we see it in the language translation, in facial recognition, in assistants like Siri and Alexa, and we don't even notice that actually AI is now part of our lives. But in addition to the consumer applications that I've just mentioned, AI is being applied across many, many sectors, and very successfully, and is changing lives and business operations. And we have with us here two experts who will speak on two sectors. One is Eric Grimson from MIT, who will speak about the AI impact on healthcare, and Raymond Cheng from the HSBC will speak about the impact of AI in the financial services sector. So these are two very important sectors. At the same time, AI is impacting the employment market in a very serious way. You know, jobs will be lost, new jobs will be created, be lots of disruption, and this is something that we are very keen to know more. And Herbert Chia is going to speak, is going to share some thoughts with us on that. AI, of course, we know has the capacity for good. It can address some of the societal changes that we have found quite intractable, like climate change. But yet, at the same time, AI can be misused, and it can also exacerbate society's problem, like inequality. It can also affect issues like privacy, bias, that causes a lot of pain, you know, that we have seen. And so to tell us about that and how what framework we can use, what principles we can apply to make sure that the AI development and application could be good and beneficial and responsible is Yamki from Google's. So I would like, what I would like to do is to ask each of the panelists to speak for 5-6 minutes to just introduce their thoughts on the particular topic, and then we will have a few minutes, some conversation, and then as quickly as possible, I will open the floor for conversation, because I know this is a topic that so many of you would like to ask questions and share your views. So Eric, please start.
A quick piece of background. I started working in the AI field in 1975, before most of you were born. In those days, AI was something you scraped off the bottom of your shoe. And I'm amused today that I don't think you can watch an ad on American television without seeing every company saying they're using AI. So this has been a fun journey for me. I want to talk about, very briefly, the impact of AI on healthcare and on aging. And I want to give you 5 quick examples. And Barbara, as we talked about earlier, you know professors can talk forever. Throw something at me at 4.5 minutes. But I want to show you places that you may not expect where already AI is having an impact and will have a big impact on the well-being of people. 5 examples. I have a colleague at MIT named Dina Katabi, who is a huge fan of Star Wars. And you're wondering, what does that have to do with anything? She says, I want to feel the Force. She's an expert in wireless communication. This room is filled with wireless signals. And as I do that, I disrupt the signal. As I make any motion, as you make a motion in this room, you're disrupting the signal. So she's built a system that can very accurately detect that. And let me simply describe how she's using it. She could put that system in the room next door. Imagine it's in a house. You can tell where the person is. You can tell whether they're sitting up or they've fallen and they're on the floor. She can detect, with no attachments to the patient, vital signs, breath rate, pulse. So now you've got an elderly parent or grandparent that wants to still live alone at home. You can monitor them unobtrusively and record those things. Somewhat frighteningly, she reports with 85% accuracy, she can tell your mood by actually picking up subtle changes in just your expression. Imagine a patient suffering from depression or something else that you are able to track that over time. She can measure gait as you walk. You've got a colleague, a parent, suffers from Parkinson's. You're able to track the progression of that disease over time, report it to a clinician. So these are just ways in which you can think about not having people needing to live in assistive care facilities until they're really ready for it, not having patients having to be in hospitals. You're able to monitor somebody in their home unobtrusively at very low cost. Interesting application. Second example I'd like to give you is, again, a colleague of mine. I only know people at MIT, by the way. That's a bad sign, and we're accused of that constantly and correctly so. Second colleague, named Regina Barzilay, who's a natural language processing expert. But she's also a breast cancer survivor. And she was very depressed, not because of the breast cancer, she's fine, but looking at the treatment because it felt like the dark ages. And what she did was to build a system that can take a wide range of material, lab reports, handwritten doctor's notes, family histories, medical images, genetic information, scientific papers, and summarize them to create a personalized summary of the case. Why is that important? I think most medical doctors will tell you the best predictor of an outcome of a case is how many similar cases has that clinician seen before. This is an amplifier that allows every doctor to be able to see hundreds of thousands of cases and yet find not only that summary, but use that summary to find what are the 10 or 20 or 50 most similar cases. How do I use that? And notice, by the way, it's an amplifier. We're going to talk about job disruption. This is an amplifier, not a replacement for the clinician. Third area, already in pretty common use, minimally invasive surgery. Using computer vision techniques to let doctors see inside the patient very accurately before they ever pick up a scalpel and open up an opening. Let them operate through very, very small openings. Truth in advertising, I did this for about 20 years. It was great fun. And we used to say that we were going to turn doctors into Superman or Superwoman. We would give them X-ray vision. They could look through the patient to see where the tumor was and where the structures were they want to avoid. I have to tell you anecdotally, every time I suggested, especially to a neurosurgeon, that I could turn him into Superman, I got this quizzical look and this expression that they needed no help achieving that status. So perhaps you've met doctors like that. And yes, the jokes are really bad. Fourth area, drug development. Crucial to all of us, incredibly expensive. Current practice, bad summary. A chemist selects a target molecule that has a known potential to interact with a specific biological target. And then they tweak the chemical properties to get higher potency or to make it easier to produce. That's still an art. It's not a science. It still takes a lot of work and a lot of experience. Incredibly time-consuming. Already you're seeing machine learning systems being able to do things like, as one system has done, read 1 million articles from the literature, learn what those patterns are, and dramatically shorten the amount of time. And again, an amplifier, not a replacement. It's giving suggestions to the chemist. And the last area is just improved diagnosis, and especially earlier diagnosis. And there's a bunch of examples here. The one I happen to like is, again, an example from breast cancer. It's one of the biggest challenges for women. And there's a class of tumor called dense breast tissue. And it's something where when that growth occurs in the breast, It is very hard to diagnose on a mammogram because it's hard to see through. And it's also something that can easily disguise as being malignant when it's actually benign. And so unfortunately, the standard recommendation for the oncologist is, we'll do the biopsy. And that, of course, has a lot of pain and other disruption for the woman. Again, a machine learning system that has already been able to train on tens of thousands of examples with one of the great hospitals in Boston, Mass General, and has been shown to perform actually at least as well as, if not better than, an expert radiologist at being able to decide for that particular kind of breast tumor, is it benign or is it close enough to being malignant that we want to go ahead with the biopsy. So I wanted just to highlight for you, in my mind, faster, earlier, less expensive diagnosis. You're going to see machine learning tools really amplifying the reach of a clinician to be able to deal with this. Personalized medicine, you heard that term a lot, but I think you're seeing that beginning to come, and that sort of notion of letting the doctor see what are the closest examples and then make the decision amplifies that doctor incredibly well. And my favorite, to be blunt, I have gray hair, you can tell. I'm sure I'm going to need this soon, but a system that could allow me in maybe 20 years, not yet, but sorry, again, bad joke, but allowing monitoring of individuals unobtrusively with nothing attached to them in their own home setting, and especially to track the slow change in behavior. If I may just quickly, the Parkinson's is one. If you know somebody who has Parkinson's, you know this is really, it's a tough disease, but it's really challenging because the progression can be so slow that the clinician has a very hard time seeing where you are. You go into the clinic every 6 months, and often they'll do things like a handwriting test or something just to see where you are on that. Now you can imagine letting the clinician very accurately see, where are you in the disease? Are we keeping it under control? Changing the quality of life and doing it in a way that the patient never even notices. So those would be my 3 highlights of how I think AI is or can and will make a big change in both healthcare and in aging.
Thank you. The net outcome of what you have described, the few examples that you gave, would the net outcome be that AI has the capacity to make affordable healthcare more widely accessible? Is that would be a net outcome?
The reason I'm smiling is, as many of you know, at least in the US, decisions about affordable healthcare are decided by people who don't know a lot about healthcare but run big insurance companies. And so it's hard to know what the impact would be. But the better answer is one has to believe yes. You're amplifying the presence of a clinician in a tremendous way. And so, think especially about people in rural settings. You buy an inexpensive little thing that you put in your house that's just monitoring your progression in some disease. That can be shipped to Boston or San Francisco or New York or the Mayo Clinic or wherever where somebody can look at it without you having to go and be there. I think it has to be yes. I would really hope, especially in the drug discovery, that it could be yes. And even though I am unfairly picking up, for a big pharma company, it's really expensive to develop those drugs because it's such an art. This has the chance to tremendously reduce that cost.
I think it's extremely hard, to follow, our MIT professor, in sharing, the exciting technology, and so on. And I'm going to start with, history, like professor. So I started, in the IT field, in the banking services, actually in the bank, 35 years ago. Okay, and I remember one of my colleagues, the first project that he did is using AI tool. Similar. And I still remember, using AI tool. Now at that time it's extremely slow. It doesn't run as Google, like Google now. To do nostril account reconciliation. Okay, and using the fuzzy logic and in order to do it. And when I look at the AI industry and how we apply into banking services nowadays, I have to share with you that again, like what Professor said, it's everywhere in the bank, and we are applying the AI technology in all departments, all services, and all product. And it's completely in the growing trend. And the transformation that is created, to our organization is humongous, okay? And, I can safely conclude that AI, is the future of the financial services, okay? And that is, one of the major pillars that, we're going to invest and continue to develop on. A few quick examples, and some of them, will echo with you. And some of them that is very familiar with you. Say, for example, quite some of your call, to the bank now, you are talking to an AI robot, okay? And we have been putting a lot of investment trying to customize the robot to somebody that you're familiar with. You're happy with the voice, coming, the emotions, coming from the robot to show you. And that is also, is the AI tools. On the financial side, we have been doing a lot of financial calculations, on our liquidity, our balance sheets, our financial model, using traditional technology. And in the recent years, we have, breakthrough progress, using AI and the latest technology. One of the tests that we have done, with Google, I didn't pay for the advertisement here, I think it was a few months ago, okay? Using compared to our current technology and using, the Google tools, the Google Cloud tools, the AI tools and the data analytic tools, we were able to cut the cost by 100 times. So that means doing the same, calculation, analysis, and so on, leveraging on the current technology, is saving a lot of cost, and also, cut the times by more than 10 times. Okay, and this is one of the, one of our very, appropriate area for us, to use AI technologies. Talking our legal department. Every day, our legal counselor is scanning tons of documents. Every time, when we have a major decision, major inquiry, they got to go through tons of documents, okay? And we are testing new AI tools to help them, to come with intelligence, to do the scanning. I think it's similar to what the doctor is doing. Of course, we are not as advanced as what you do, in the MIT lab, okay? But that, gives, tremendous advantage to us. In terms of fighting financial crime, okay, and the financial fraud, we're applying a lot of AI technology, to help us, to make sure that we safeguard, all the, asset, for our customer, okay, and make sure that, we work with the right customer and work with, other parties like, the government bodies and that closely, using the AI tools. So there are lots of areas that we do this, okay, and it creates a lot of, a lot of transformation, to the whole industry. If I can summarize one of the major transformation and changes that will happen, in the industry, I'll summarize. I said, number one, of course, we'll continue to increase the automation in every areas, in the organization, no matter whether your finance function, risk function, marketing functions, or operation or IT function. We're going to do AI tool to improve, our information technology investment as well. Okay. Second thing, the primary ingredients, to support better AI is the data. Okay, we absolutely need to continue to make the right investment in the data, in our own data, our own customer data, and leverage on the public data, available, in the internet, and so on. Okay, and we're gonna make sure that we are smart, using them. In terms of customer loyalty and relationship, I'm seeing, with the AI development and applications, you go through a major transformation. Okay, it will gradually move away from personal relationship, and we're going to aid, this relationship, to keep the loyalty with the customer with the AI tools and AI technologies. Okay, and in terms of the work that we will do as a talent that will invest, we're going to see a big shift, from the operational elements, into areas related to AIs. There's data, there's analytics, there's cloud tools, and so on. They're all the related areas. Okay, and last but not least, of course, the business model that we are running, the new products that we're running will be enabled or has to be enabled by the technologies. Otherwise, we wouldn't compete better in the market and delight our customer.
Please hold your call. It's important to us, and the agent is coming soon.
It's very familiar there. Right?
Actually, a serious question. You mentioned lower costs, faster time on everything, and more efficient innovation in new products and services. Can I imply from that the net result, or one of the net results, would be that the financial services could become more widely available, if not just from your bank, but from the sector to the, to the population?
With the recent technology development, internet, cloud, AI, and big data, okay, you can see a lot of vivid examples, under the fintech umbrella, that the financial services expanded, to include a lot of people, a lot of countries, areas where there are lack of financial services. Absolutely, that helps to expand, into all this area, and that's the main reason against that. That's is because of the efficiency and the ability, to commoditize the products. That they can, and then extend, with fast response time and so on, to the wider area, to cover more populations around the world.
I think from the last question, I want to continue with that, right? That efficiency is not the only exit from the AI, especially when you look into smart city, right? If you look into the city as an organic, it's an organic city. It's a lot of trade-off between, when you're getting something better, but there's a trade-off on the other hand that you have to fight against as well. So when we're talking about AI, I think one of the important things is that not to think about is just about to, make things more efficient or effective. Otherwise, for sure, that it will eliminate a lot of labor in the future. But if you're looking at that as you're actually creating something that has never been done before, right? It's actually creating a new paradise rather than just looking in this right now as it's just keeping doing a automatic automating all the process. But then there's another things I want to add is that when we talk about AI, it's actually a pretty broad kind of word, right? Actually, at this moment of time, most of the time when we're talking about AI, is about machine learning. It's about recognize or to recognize what is happening in this world, and then I try to put this this kind of intelligence into a IT process, so that we're doing something better than before. So that's what AI about at the moment. But if you're looking into the ability of the AI at this moment, right? The eye of a human, the ear of the human, so we hear better, we see better, and we talk better, right? But if you put this all together as a human, right? We're still far away from what we call a strong AI, right? We're still in the very early stage of AI era. So that's that's something that we. But then that's also it's a very fascinating kind of result that we are getting. But as a guy who worked on this, like I think it will be more like over the last 6-7 years on big data and AI, I see a lot more problem than the result. Because when I'm looking into the AI result, I always think about how about if the data is not there's a lot of noise in the data. What happened to this? And I always worry about the noise of the data. Because I'm a big data guy, so I always looking into that. I say, how about if tomorrow you're doing some kind of very mission critical process where you didn't really know about the data that you have getting is clean enough or is good enough. But then there's a very, it's very contradiction, because the data that we are getting from the big data usually coming from a lot of source, right? And I mean, as I'm also, my first job is in HSBC, right? So Raymond is my boss, and so at that time we do a lot of job in the bank to make sure that the data is right. But where in the big data field, such as like a recommendation engine for Ali, right? We didn't really have to make it right 100%. So sometimes it might be like 85% accuracy is enough for me to deliver the job. And then we don't really have to think about what about the 50% that when I fail. And maybe that is something that you could talk about. 15% when it's a fail in a surgery operation will be a disaster. But if a 15% wrong in terms of advertisement pushed to your mobile phone, right, it's okay. I think it's even worse than 15%. It's like 50% wrong most of the time. But the advertiser get used to it, right? They get used to throwing money to the rubber spin. So it's okay, 50% not accurate in terms of advertisement. So that's why I want to talk about that. When you put in something, not a research, not an R&D, but you want to put it into a bank operation, it's much and much harder than you using it in a POC, a proof of concept stage. Then you need to make it reliable, and you need to make it more stable. So then that's one, I follow up the question. But then also that about, even in our field, right, in the AI field and the data field, over the last 7 years, the job model has actually been changing a lot. And at this moment, right, I will think the most of the hot job in the future will be data product manager. And when I coming into China, when I visit a lot of companies, lack of product manager who really know about how to make use of data for the product. And then that's one new job that never been in the market before. A product manager black hat with data capability. We sometimes call this a data product manager, but I think it's wrong. It should be product manager black hat with data capability. But then there's also another guy who also a data product manager, means that data as a product. So his result coming from a data, and the result is the data as well. So it's a data product manager who produce a lot of the data as what I call a middle layer. So other people can make use of data in a like a ready use manner. That's another job. But I just want to mention about the AI people and also the big data people is also encounter change. So they themselves actually change the job model a lot of time. Maybe I can tell you a story that that is encounter to me 4 years ago as to stop my presentation. I actually tell by Jack asked me to eliminate all my business analysts, data analysts, because he think that we can using an automatical way to doing this rather than have so many analysts in the room, right? So analysts, the data analyst is also be part of the in the list of eliminating job. Even though we are actually the guy who's starting with this, but then we are also facing kind of the transformation, right? So this transformation is just begin, and what it that be evolving, right? It's really hard to say, but to end this, I think we have to believe that human has enough intelligence to create more things for the world, to have a better, to create a better world out of our technology, rather than creating something that will kill ourselves.
Just to throw out some numbers, according to McKinsey, between the year 2016 and 2030, they estimate that 400 million jobs will be lost. And on a number of scenarios, 500 something million to 900 something million will be new jobs will be created. They say the average of 700 million. So you have 400 million jobs to be lost, that will be lost, 700 million new jobs that will be created. But the jobs are not the same. In other words, what Herbert has just shown is that, the data analyst job will no longer be available, even though that person has been directly involved in the data, which is the lifeblood of the AI business. So we will see a lot of disruption between the time, the transition will be pretty messy. And how we get there, and how do you train garment workers in Bangladesh to be data scientists or to work with AI? That's the challenge, I think, that the world will face. So we could have a situation where we would have mass technology unemployment as well as millions of unfilled positions because of the gap.
Usually, I don't believe what McKinsey was providing, right? Because the mechanism they are actually using is a very traditional way to predicting the future, right? It's not a new analytic method. I mean, to doing this, it's actually a projection on what is this world going to be, right, in a traditional way.
Sure.
And didn't really use a new ways like what sometimes like MIT Media Lab have using, right? For like we need to actually simulate the data, simulating the data and generate some kind of data in order to predict, rather than doing a simple projection, right? Because it is an organic world. So sometimes maybe like when AI going very fast, some of the people might scare. And they will step back and say, how about we just keep it in a very traditional way? And like 80% of people say, I will accept a traditional way than an advanced method. So it's slowing down the evolving process. But anyway, I just want to kidding a little bit on that.
It's good to get a different perspective.
Every 10 years, there are major technology that comes about and that changes how the technology sector, how the economy works. And recognizing that I'm in the presence of Mr. Palmasino from IBM, who is a legendary company that have been a part of this process throughout. I'm going to speak humbly about this. In the 70s and 80s, 70s really, you had the mainframe. And then came PC. Then the next decade came internet. And the next decade came smartphones. And now we're in the decade, I think, of cloud and AI, and they're interrelated. And one interesting thing is that, as IBM probably can recognize, success in the last era doesn't determine success in the next era. This really changes how your company operates, how your economy is built, how you reach your customers, and how your company processes information. So I think we are in a time where cloud and AI, as some of the speakers here talk about, how it's going to really revolutionize healthcare, finance, transportation, and something we talked about yesterday, and other fields. I think it's going to be fascinating. We at Google are at the forefront of thinking about this, both on the research of AI, publishing papers, as well as on the application of AI in terms of how we incorporate it in our products, and then democratizing AI in terms of making it available to everyone. And we do that through a library, through both our cloud services, which corporates can use, and then also an open source library called TensorFlow that allow people to use it. But with it, we also recognize there are great responsibilities that we need to think thoughtfully about how this technology is developed, how we use it, and how others should use it. So this is kind of how we look at our principles. And I want to caution that this is, again, recognizing the Asia Global Dialogue, this is the principles of a company. who happens to be headquartered in the US, and it's our view of how we approach it. And other companies may have different views. But I think this is a way to maybe start the conversation of where society want to think about where this goes. So there's 7 principles that we have. The first is it has to be socially beneficial. So when we think about when we're developing AI, whether it's the application of it, the tool that's being used, is it social? Is it benefiting the society, or is it just tech for tech's sake? Like, what is the purpose of it? The second is, and this touched on an issue that you had mentioned, which was AI should avoid creating or reinforcing unfair biases, right? So in the case of finance, that the output of the AI algorithms doesn't discriminate based on race or other sensitive factors of an individual. Third, AI should be built and tested for safety. Right? The safety should be very much in the mind of how we build the technology and how we use it. An example of this is our sister company, Waymo, that does autonomous vehicles. Right? It uses a lot of AI for the vehicle itself, but we're also doing tests of it to see how it behaves, how does it direct the vehicle, what are the potential liabilities, how does it work, right? And do the testing of that. Number 4, and this is very important, we believe AI should be accountable to people. About half a year ago, one of our chief scientists, Li Feifei, actually published an op-ed on this. AI, artificial intelligence, is not artificial at all. It's created by human beings, it's deployed by human beings, and we are responsible for it. So the way we deploy artificial intelligence should be chosen by people, by managers, by data scientists, and we are responsible for the results, how it looks, how it works, whether or not there's discrimination, all of that. Number 5, we should incorporate privacy design principles in the design of the AI model itself. So what are we doing to protect the data that feeds into the AI model? And then, as Herbert mentioned, the output, the data output. How do we handle that and manage that data? And how is that model used? Number 6, upholding high standards of scientific excellence. And 2 ways. One is, for us as a company, we do a lot of research. So we will continue to publish peer review articles on AI research so that others can learn from it. But to your point about success, we have to benchmark. There is a scientific method. We're not doing AI for AI's sake. It has to prove and to demonstrate that it is at best the same and ideally better than the existing system. What HSBC is doing is exactly that. You run a process of an existing system, you use big data and AI, and you test it, and then you see what is the cost saving, how much time are you saving, and are you getting better results, right? And that's important when you're deploying AI. It's not just do AI. It's what's the next best alternative. And then number 7, it should be made available for users that accord to these principles that we've laid out. Again, these are Google's principle. So if it's being deployed in other ways, not listed there, we would want to correct that. Now, we also took the effort to list out areas that we, as a company, will not pursue AI in. Right? So we have principles of where we think it should be, and then a couple areas, 4 areas that we won't pursue AI in. First is technologies that will cause or are likely to cause overall harm. Right? That can harm people. So to the extent that there are going to be times where AI could have the potential to do that, such as autonomous driving, we need to evaluate it and put in appropriate safety measures in accordance with it. It doesn't mean don't do it, but it's how do you go about it. Second, we will not pursue AI in weapons or other technologies whose principal purpose or implementation is to cause or directly facilitate injury to people. That's our stance on this issue. Third is we will not pursue AI technologies that gather or use information for surveillance that violates internationally accepted norms. That's something that, again, for us, a red line for us that we won't cross. And then lastly, we won't pursue AI technologies that whose purpose contravenes widely accepted principles of international law and human rights. So though there are existing frameworks around human rights that the international community has agreed to, we should recognize, though, and see how this technology that we're developing relates to it. So again, these are just how Google is thinking about it. I don't think it's necessarily the de facto right answer. I think each society and each company should also think about this and how they're using artificial intelligence.
The whole day we've been listening to the multilateral system, and what we have heard is that perhaps we have to accept that the reformation of the multilateral system, which is now broken, but perhaps the reform could be on a specific sector basis, ideas basis. So I'm approaching it on that assumption that if we can't reform the whole big system, could we approach it from sectoral basis? And in this regard, I like to start with you and Yam Ki to ask, what you said, the principles that apply at Google, could that be expanded to the whole sector and globally as a multilateral system for the development and application of AI?
Contrary to popular belief, Google's not a government. I think it certainly could, but our goal here is we've been very thoughtful in this process, and we wanted to share publicly how we thought about this. And I think it allows for some common thinking that has been floating around probably in different pockets and trying to bring it together on a page or two as a starting point. I think each country could have different needs around what is socially beneficial. That varies by country. And for the sectors, there will be areas where they will have to probably flesh out a little more what that means for them. So in the case of unfair biases or discrimination, for finance, that's one area that a lot of people are concerned about. And same with healthcare, that it could be used to essentially segregate certain set of people from treatment or from insurance. And we have to be thoughtful in making sure that that's not the outcome of the technology. But I think it does create, certain key pillars for people to gravitate around and to have that thoughtful conversation, the beginning of that conversation. And one of the panelists earlier in the day talked about how there's the speed of change, and AI is changing quickly, technology is changing quickly, and regulations haven't caught up. And that doesn't mean that regulation has to come now, or that this is the right time, or it has it right. But I think there needs to be a conversation so that we're not caught off guard when the right moment comes, and what the contours of that will look like.
Yeah, okay. Just now I asked you earlier, Eric and Raymond, whether the AI could make healthcare more inclusive and also the financial services. And you said yes. So taking the view that one of the ways to reform the multilateral system would be from the people to people and bottom up. So I like comment from you, Eric, first, and then Raymond, as to whether this is possible, that there could be a multilateral agreement on affordable health care for all. Perhaps not just in the USA, which is a very exceptional situation, but perhaps for the rest of the world.
Barbara, I'm going to do what an academic always does, which is answer a slightly different question. Because healthcare is so hard. But I want to answer the point of your question, and I'm going to build on the previous answer. I think there's a lot of appetite among companies. Google's done a great job on this. Microsoft has a position paper out on this. There's a lot of appetite between companies and academic institutions, and that will bring in nonprofits and I hope eventually governments to talk about how do we set up international alliances around that. I was in a conversation in Shanghai about 3 or 4 weeks ago around exactly at that point. So I don't know the answer in healthcare. I think it's a really hard special case. But I think in general, there is an appetite among the thought leaders to say, let's talk about what it means to have principles about how we deal with that. If I may add one other quick thing, I know I'm taking too long, but another quick example of that is, and due respect to great companies, but companies take advantage of the fact that they have massive amounts of data. It's their stock and trade. In something like healthcare, what about a partnership that actually creates that data appropriately de-identified so you preserve privacy, that can be shared, open source, the same way that TensorFlow shares software open source, so that anybody, any company, any country can use the data to their advantage to deal with it. Those are things where I think there's a chance of making some progress. It'll take leadership. Sorry, being from the US, I don't have a lot of optimism about political leadership right now, but maybe intellectual leadership could, I think, get us to that point.
We are working with the U.S. National Institute of Health to help create a secure, research-focused health database using cloud technology, so that researchers from different parts of the world can use a large data set to solve problems like Parkinson's, cancer, etc. And again, because we're in Hong Kong, I think Hong Kong also has that opportunity. Hong Kong is a city with a centralized database, and I think appropriate, secure access to information that can help, solve some issues here, can help Hong Kong become a biomedical research center, which will be phenomenal.
In terms of this data, there are certain elements tied with the culture, the countries, and I think the human beings, the bodies, in some way, have their unique characteristics, in different areas in the countries, and hence the data, the quality of data, and where we get the data, and all these are very important. So in a sense, in the financial world, we have similar situation. Okay, so first thing, in terms of financial inclusion, definitely, with the latest technologies, internet, AI, big data, and so on, absolutely have increased and improved the financial inclusion, around the world. Okay, and in a sense, it is happening, in pockets. So in this multilateralism, in the different sectors and so on, I'm seeing that it's happening, in individual cases, in individual countries, and so on, okay? And all riding on their own characteristics of the jurisdictions, on the area to apply the financial services. But definitely it's increasing and improving. I did mention that data is a major element and foundation, on the AI. And of course, in the financial world, we are, respecting the data privacy regulations, and the data ownership, issues and so on. Then we got to follow them. Okay, and this is a very important element. And of course, another element is the regulations. Okay, and we got to respect, whatever we do, with applying AI, the regulations set by different countries, we absolutely need to follow them and make sure that we do not violate them.
I think I want to follow up on what Raymond and all the others has mentioned about. I think technology in terms of the algorithm, right? It's much easier for us to have the algorithm open source and share among the different country or nation. But it will be harder to having the data sharing between the country, because when we're talking about the data for the country, usually it's not just the data itself, because the data, sometimes a kind of data is safe, right? But if the data linked with another data, it becomes very sensitive. And then so each country will have their policy on protecting against the data, right, in different reasons. So they have the residential rules on the data cannot be exported out of the country. So Professor has mentioned about, so there is a way to doing it, because for example, like, having use of homomorphic encryption and secure secure computing kind of technology to break through. So I essentially believe that technology will becoming the tools to break through instead of the people talk about, how about we have a thought leader. So if you have a thought leader to talk about this, then another thought leader say, no, we don't think that should be shared. But in terms of technology-wise, right, the technology might be becoming the tools to resolve this, because when I have the data anonymous, right, and then and become safe to use among different countries. So in order to do that, right, I actually working on some of the work on this, but in order to do that, I think most of the countries should allowing some of the pilot, work with the pilot first, with a less risk, so that country and country becoming share data among each other for the sake of their country or the citizen, with a smaller scale, a less risk project first. And then once they get get a hands on it, they will become and say, okay, maybe we can do more. So that's the way I think in terms of the data. But in terms of algorithm, I think it's much easier, because you can see when people are announcing about the deep learning algorithm, there's so many people have already got the deep learning because of company like Google actually open up a lot of their algorithm, open up of a lot of the research to the public, to the world. So it's easy, but data is different to the algorithm.
It's a wonderful new technique out. It's called homeomorphic encryption. Still a little slow, but the idea is that you can have data encrypted in a database, and this will allow you to query the database without breaking the encryption. Now, you can't answer everything that way, but I agree with you. That gives you a way of dealing with the specialties of different sources, different access, and we'll see where it goes. I think it's too slow yet, but we'll get there.
There's another technology called differentiate privacy, right? Which just means that after you're getting the result, I'm going to put back some noise onto the data set so that you cannot figure out, who is Herbert. Yeah, right. Who is Herbert and who is Raymond? But you still get result that that the percentage of male and female in this room, right? But you don't know that in this room there is a Herbert and Raymond is in this room. So a differentiation privacy is another way. But I will presume that there will be a lot more technology coming out, right? For example, like blockchain together with the AI and all this kind of things. So I'm the guy who more believe on technology can help technology.
I want to take up or ride on what Eric has just mentioned about the, may I say, sort of the utopia of shared data across countries and globally. I think that is definitely something that will really have a major impact on humanity. I'm the optimist, and I think that is all for the good, and definitely that's something that we should work towards. But then, on your point about it has to sort of have leadership and things like that. I think we have to also be realistic that that may not happen, and we need to work together to create some baby steps or some. There's a whole spectrum of things that we can do perhaps before we can achieve that. I just want to share some of the experience that we have. Herbert mentioned that there are initiatives that actually we are working together to achieve that longer term goal about cross-border data exchanges and so on, sharing. There is also something very practically that we have been practicing, at least at Cyberport with a lot of enterprises, that we do a lot of a variation of a hackathon, which we call datathon, that enterprises can actually share their data and let startups to work on applications and so on, so that this is not just for the startup community to get into this game and offer their applications and so on. It's more actually for the enterprises, the middle management in particular, usually for enterprises that the leaders or top management are quite open on this and want to take make changes on digital transformation and so on. But then it's usually the middle management that is really dragging their feet, and let them actually have the exposure to be convinced that actually these things can do great with proper data and with AI application acting on it and so on. This is one, small baby steps that we can gradually change the mindset. There is also in Hong Kong, because we are international finance center, so we are relatively more open and we embrace technology in the finance sector. So there's a fintech community that's very strong in Hong Kong, in Cyberport in particular. There is this cooperations that we have with Hong Kong Monetary Authority to create a sandbox. It's actually letting traditional banks or financial institutions to put in, an environment for them to test things out. Yeah. So these are things that we probably can do more together with, I don't know, maybe perhaps MIT. I'm talking to Charleston to see how we can work together to make these actually happen. It's through this spectrums of baby steps that I think we can achieve those the utopia that you mentioned.
But I would generalize it by saying I think you're already seeing a lot of activity in the academic community about coming around to this, discussions around doing this. And I'm delighted that we're seeing it in the corporate community. Google, Microsoft are two that have started it, but the others will deal with that. And so we may well be able to build on simple steps and let the grassroots grow to the point where it's big enough that then we can go to the regulators to say, we're doing it, guys. Why don't you figure out how to make it work more broadly? Sorry, last quick comment is the issue of bias is really important here, and that's where the broader the data sets are, the less likely we've got accidental bias in how we're concluding something.
How do panelists think the relationship between AI and also the financial market? Will you see it as an unfair advantage, like big company, they can leverage on big data, their capitals, or would you see something like they would make the market more volatile because more people are using algorithm trading, quant trading, something like that?
I don't think you expect a priest to ask in these sessions.
It's existential.
Don't have soul.
Well, I have an MIT friend who is working on a robot who has faith. So it's a big challenge. But my question is to the panel. I'm very, very glad to hear those ethical points that you mentioned, Yam, that Google is taking, which is very comforting for a person like me who is very much concerned about ethics and AI. And in the excitement of the development of AI, whether software or hardware, sometimes we compromise ethics. So my question is, how can you, all of you, raise the trust that I could have in AI as a consumer without losing faith in you? Because the latest scandals in AI made us all cringe a bit, from Facebook to even the machines that answer phones that Barbara mentioned. That all concerns me, actually, that the trust is not there. For example, like, don't buy Alexa or Siri because they listen to your conversation all the time. All those things that come with the AI. What are you doing on the ethical part that you regain my trust as a consumer?
Hi, I was just remembering the sight of Mark Zuckerberg testifying in Congress and how shocking it was that the policymakers were simply not up to the task of really let's not even talk about regulation, but really to understanding the sector. And I'm following up on the question. I actually think that the industry, however, has the responsibility to make sure that they are as educated as they need to be. Because I don't think in the case of Facebook, the fact that the policymakers didn't understand is going to let Facebook off the hook. So AI is going to be more complex and more difficult. So I just want to know, especially those in the industry, how do you see your responsibility in making sure that we actually have a level playing field across different intellectual political classes, that we are really not walking in this together, almost totally blind for a lot of them.
Personally, I do not use Facebook anymore. Because one day, Facebook sent a mail to me that includes 10 photos. And that 10 photos are new, I never seen in my life, but I'm inside the photo. From all my old classmates, old friends, and all that. And that scared me a lot. You know? So, and think about what they can do at the back of knowing all this. And by the way, my personal photo, you know, in the Facebook was very dark gray, and only Peter and Constant know that, or it's me, and nobody can see that. So you can see AI, you know, in some ways very powerful. So quickly, very good questions. But I'm telling you, in the practical world, I'm telling you what is happening now. Okay, the limit that we use AI, okay, are more on supporting our operations. Supporting decision making is not the final decision making. Okay, a lot of application that we do is to speed up our decision making. You know, supporting our lawyer, supporting a financial planner, and all that. So we make recommendation, we make faster decision, or we make decision writing on more data. But the final decision is on human beings. Okay, so I'm reflecting what's currently what we are doing now. Now we are bound by regulations, and we're going to make sure that we are fair to the customer, and so on. But in general, most of them there. The closest one, is sometimes when we make mistakes is, like what you experience, is full automation by AI is our chatbot. So that's why I asked you to stand there to wait, for a human being to get on. But then I would say that, the limit that we try to drive more and more on, at the end, is a human decision. At this point of time, that's what's happening in our organization. In terms of all the quick development, major development, writing on big data and all that, I would say so far it's fair across the market, as long as the data and the operations and the way that we make a decision are transparent, to the consumer and across all the market, and that would be the fair play. That's what we try to achieve at the moment. Now, with the development of AI and all that, I leave other three panelists to comment on in future.
Barbara, if I could make
Ethical question.
well, I'm going to do two. I'm going to do two of the questions. So, on the issue of finance, let me describe very quickly. There's a goal among a lot of AI researchers to be able to do the engineering of AI, especially machine learning, to turn those tools into something that's as easy to use as Word or Excel. And if you can do that, that ought to level the playing field at least a little bit for just the individual investor as opposed to, Rentec or Two Sigma or some giant hedge fund. And especially when you throw in the data. I mean, you'll never be as good as an analyst, but it ought to level the playing field. And to the question of ethics, which is a great question, I'm going to borrow from Yang Kim. When a company tells you things they will not do because they think it violates a principle, I hope that restores a little bit of trust, that they're not just doing things for the bottom line. We can't have more disasters of making mistakes, but I like the fact that Google takes the position that says, here are things that we simply will not work on because it violates our fundamental principles. If you don't agree with our principles, you can disagree with the decision. But I think you're seeing more of the AI field swinging that way as they realize that, yes, it's exciting to build the new tool, but if it gets used in a way that you just don't want, it's a problem. So we need to say what we won't do as well as what we will do. Hopefully that will help.
Starting with the finance question, AI and finance. I think there are a couple of things that are working in conjunction that can actually get to a pretty good result. One is, from our perspective, we have made TensorFlow public, open source. It's on GitHub. Anyone can download it. It's probably the most downloaded machine learning package in the world. And you do need some machine learning training to use it, but that puts it in the hands of a lot of people who may not be in HSBC, but still wants to use it and learn it. On the data part, the world will actually have, because I think some of the initiatives that's being talked about, where you can access a lot more data, especially public data around financials. I mean, you're not going to be able to get public data of or data of customers, but stock prices, options, different sort of straddle trades. These are all available. You may have to pay for it depending on the firm, but that's available. And then thirdly, the computing power. And this is where I put on my cloud hat, that you no longer have to go and invest in a huge data center to be able to combine the data with the machine learning and then spend $1 million or $2 million to invest in servers. Now you can start that up for $5 US a month and test the idea and see if it works. And trust me, there are hundreds of people in Hong Kong alone that are doing that to find misvalued assets throughout the markets. So I think that helps democratize the access of AI to finance. And to touch on the question on the education part, and it relates to the TensorFlow open source. Number one is making that available. And number two is creating more resources to help educate. So we created a whole portal called Google.ai that publishes our research papers, that has a machine learning crash course for people who just want to learn the basics of how it works, to various courses and materials that are tailored for high school students, college students, professors to get their hands on understanding this. And I think there will be more explanation around how AI is in the product. At the same time, we all have a responsibility to understand what is it that we're doing, right? When we're using a knife, there's a process of teaching how it works. You don't give it to a kid. I think in the same way with AI, there are going to be practitioners and mentors in that process. I think that's a good thing. But we'll be doing our part, and I think others hopefully are hoping to learn to get up to speed. And then on the ethics question, that's a very, very important question. And now I think underlying that is one about privacy. And that is fundamental to all of the businesses that we do here, from banking, certainly in schools and healthcare industry, and in technology. We have, what we've done is list out a set of a kind of privacy framework, things that are fairly common, notice and consents. User has the right to see what data we're collecting from you, be able to download it, be able to delete it, right? All of that is possible. You shouldn't be stuck with our system. You should be able to use, if you don't like to use Gmail, you can yank it all out and say, I'm going to go take it and put it somewhere else. That's all possible. And then also, I think companies need to be held liable, right? When there are breaches, there should be consequences. There should be a process for that. So I think that's one part on restoring the trust around privacy. And then the second part is on value. And it goes back to the first principle that I talked about, which is be socially beneficial. What value are you creating for the customer? You are probably using a lot of AI in the Google products already. From your email, if you use Gmail, they have smart reply that makes recommendation for you. When you use Google Maps, it's calculating different routes and finding you the fastest route. It's making recommendation on restaurants. When you watch YouTube, there are translation of videos from English to other languages that are automatically captioned using our translation artificial intelligence technology. So all of those are ways that you're already using it, and it's going to be, I think it's a big topic now, but I think it'll be a time where we think about it just like using a keyboard or a phone. It's just a tool, and that as long as it's creating value for the user on how they are interacting with the world, I think it will be in a better spot. But we'll continue to, I think, review and discuss that.
In terms of the algorithm, all the tools, right, it becomes much easier to access. That's right. But then when you're putting a data as a resources for the algorithm, right, the large company do have a lot of advantage of having more data in order to acquire a customer in a much more efficient way or all the others, right? So a company who has a lot of data will have this advantage. Plus, this, today, right, as today, when you're looking into the agreement of, you're using an application, right? Usually when they talk about is the groups, the holding company, rather than just that company itself, right? It means that the subsidiary of the company can actually using the data as well. Although it's with a bracket called minimum use of data, but minimum use of data is actually really hard to define. But that's something that we need to define in the future. The scope of getting the data for a company, right? So there's one thing, right? I think when you have more data, you do have a lot of advantage on having that data for the same algorithm. For the trust, right? I think sometimes when we say, we can build a trust, it's actually sometimes we don't really know what the trust means, because even the engineer cannot repeat the algorithm with the same result when the data is changing, when the environment is changing. Because right now, when we're making a decision, it's like the data is not stored into the storage; it's in a fly. It's like what we call this while the data is flowing, right? We're already doing an algorithm rather than storing it. So it's on the fly, the data. For example, I just give you an example, like if I'm going to recommend something to you today, right? Whether I should believe on the data that you have already browsed or buying in the past, or I should more believe what you have browsed today, right? So the decision between believe your history or believe your instant now, right, is becoming when I decided to giving you a product to recommend. It's very hard for me to explain why that product has come into the front of your eye. Even if the management ask me, can you explain why? I will say, it takes a lot of time for me to explain, because the training of data is coming from a lot of external data. It's coming from a lot of internal data as well. It's really hard to say, please trust me, right? Because I myself didn't really trust myself, because the algorithm is by deep learning, by learning from a lot of data. And it's coming out of, but the result is really hard to explain now. It's unpredictable sometimes. So a trust, when I give you a word, say, please trust me. If as a data engineering, right, as a data scientist, I would say, please don't trust me, because when I'm looking at this data, sometimes I can hardly explain why the result is coming out. I mean, I just want to play a little bit of the role of devil, on this, but of course we can have a lot of the other things to ensure that the result will not hurt the customer, because I can have another algorithm to look after that, right? So sort of like this guy is recommending a product to your customer, then there's another algorithm is checking whether I'm doing the right job, right? Of course I can do that, but I just want to play this role. When we say trust, what's the meaning by trust?
I like to ask the second question, and I must warn you that it's very controversial, and it's something that we have been talking about the whole day. So I'm going to ask the question anyway. We talk about U.S.-China relations and the trade war, and I'm going to put as a thesis, purely as a thesis, to the 4 experts, that the real conflict between China and the U.S. is about technology. And in fact, it's about who gets to dominate in AI. In July 2017, the Chinese government issued a State Council paper saying that China will be number 1 in AI by the year 2030. Okay, that got a lot of people very agitated, in particular the U.S. government. And so my thesis is the fight is on who dominates in AI, who gets to quantum computing first, and so forth.
Do I think that that's what the conflict is about?
Correct.
Yes.
I love the answer.
I mean, if I can add 30, I know we're between you and drinks, which is really dangerous, although the door's over there. I think that is a big part of it. And I know it's a dangerous thing to say, but you're asking a controversial question. If China wants to win that fight, in my view, it needs to drastically rethink its higher education process. Because until they encourage more creative thinking among their incredible talent, I don't think they're going to get there.
I think it's hard to comment, on that, right? So, we are saying it's not playing safe, right? It's a lot of competing factors, between the two, the two countries. Okay, in a sense, I'm a technologist. Okay, so I do believe for countries, if they want to win now, but of course it depends on how you define the winning. Okay, technology plays a very important part. Okay, a key part. And the people, the education, okay, that create and flourish, technology is a key factor, okay. Whether 2030, AI is number one. So what's the meaning of AI number one? We want to be data number one, right? So it is very abstractive, very abstract, that from my perspective. But technology, okay, doing technology and have the talent, who knows the technology and innovative and create the right technology, I think is the winner.
I agree with him.
Finally, he respect me that he report to me some times ago.
I agree. But I think I will put it in this word like is a technology-driven innovation becoming a lot more important for a nation to be had in terms of the technology in the future. In many ways, it's just not just the competition itself, but there's a lot of problem that we have to resolve by the technology as well for a country, not just because of the GDP shake, right? But it's also because of there's a lot of problem or more problem coming out, and then we want to resolve it with technology-driven innovation.
You have the last word.
I should say that this was my view and not my company
Google.
view.
He's from Google.
My personal view. And actually I don't think it's that different from the group here. I think it's actually it's a red herring. Because at the end of the day, technology is about people. That's what drives the innovation and the creation. And unlike goods, if you think of the first revolution, right, production revolution was technology around agriculture. You needed land, you needed fertilizer, right, and land is a hard resource. There's a constraint on that. Then we became goods, trading goods, where you're producing certain things. You need factories, and how to power those factories, and then you have services, which is the knowledge economy, and AI it's a relation to that where you need the people to create it, and it changes so fast that it's not as if you take a bunch of patent and therefore you have AI. It iterates, it updates, it evolves, and not to think of it as a robotic way evolve, but as in the technology gets better. And it's not location based; it's people based, and it's about finding a group of people who are scientifically curious, who are entrepreneurial, who wants to fail fast and try ideas. And I think a country that has that environment ultimately will lead in that world.
Okay.
This is my thesis was that this is what the conflict is really all about. Remember some of our earlier speakers alluded that, even Professor Michael Spence, he says, well, maybe trading is a red herring, maybe it's about technology or something else. So that was my thesis, that could it be about the fight on AI, who would get there first? I see so many of you still seated, even if it's after 5:30, And I know if we had continued, you would have loved it. But unfortunately, they expect all of us at the cocktail reception. So let's give them a great hand.
Thank you.